Well, welcome everybody to the Menlo Midweek podcast. My name is Mark. We have a bit of a different episode here today. We're actually talking with Harold Escalante. He is our broadcast video director here at Menlo Church. And he was the one, if you remember, that shared a story about him finding out that his dad potentially wasn't his biological dad. So now we get to hear the rest of that story. And so as we're in our series called Storytellers, learning how to identify as storytellers and the hope that we can share with others by sharing our story, I thought it'd be a wonderful time to invite Harold back on so that we can hear the rest of his story. We'd love to encourage you as well to continue to try to identify as a storyteller. We've created some resources for you that you can find on menlo.church, and we're running a contest this week on social. So head over to @menlo.church on Instagram and follow along, because if you submit a story, you're automatically entered to win a special prize, which you're going to figure out in just a second here in the Menlo Midweek podcast. Let's go ahead and jump in. Well, welcome everybody to the Menlo Midweek podcast. My name is Mark, and Harold is back with us today. Woo! Harold, thanks so much for being here. If you missed out on Harold's episode that he was sitting in with Matt Summers, which, by the way, that guy still owes us lunch or dinner.
He does.
Okay, let's tell everyone why he still owes us dinner.
Okay, so he promised us dinner if our video hit 500K views. It is now at around 800K.
Yeah,
so he almost
wild.
owes us 2 dinners.
He does. Yeah, it's crazy. But that was from a Menlo Midweek podcast that we did quite a bit ago. And Harold, we wanted you back on because you started telling us a story about your life that we basically got a cliffhanger ending to, because up until that point, the story wasn't finished.
That's right.
And so before we jump back into that, let's remind people who you are, how'd you find Menlo, what you're doing now for Menlo, and then we'll jump in after that.
Yeah. So my name's Harold. I am the broadcast video director for Menlo Church.
Cool.
Everything I do is related to broadcast video. So it's very
What
technical.
does that mean, Harold? What is a broadcast?
A
video?
broadcast is almost every church has some kind of a basement, and there's a dude that lives in that basement.
Okay. Yeah.
And pushes buttons.
Yeah.
And makes the live stream happen.
Okay.
And so that's part of my job. That's
Awesome.
one little piece of my job. And I'm also very heavily involved with brilliant volunteers.
Okay.
A wide range of very talented people. And we do it all together. And we serve and we use our talents. And sometimes we are not very, I would say, socially talented.
Okay.
But we are very technically talented.
Very diplomatic way to say that,
Yes,
Harold.
we serve God with the best of our abilities.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
You do a great job encouraging that team. And for those that are like, hey, I wonder how when Phil says something, there's an illustration that pops up on the screen behind him, or there's the Bible verse that he's mentioning. That's you and your team, yeah?
Yes, so that's sometimes usually a volunteer even who creates those graphics or makes that graphic appear. In one capacity or another, there's many hands that are involved in that.
Awesome. I don't want to give too much of a blatant, hey, you should join Harold's team right now, but I think I'm going to. That all sounds hard and difficult.
It does.
Is it?
It's not.
Okay.
It's really not. So like I said, everyone, there's many hands involved, so everyone plays a small part in that. And it just really is a lot of fun to do. Like if you're really passionate about designing and production or camera stuff, there's a place for you. There's a place where you can just plug yourself in and be a part of a fun community of people who are really techie.
Awesome. I love that. Do you have to know a little bit about techie stuff before you can join your team?
Absolutely not.
Oh,
We
okay.
provide all the training.
For a layman like me, I could do it.
Yes, sir.
There's hope.
Yes, there is hope for you, Mark.
Thanks, man. Awesome. Well, when you're not in the basement,
Yeah.
what do you do for fun? Where do you live? What's your family like?
So I'm from Pacifica.
Okay.
It's if you don't know, it's a very foggy place.
Yeah.
There's a lot of surfing. There's a lot of beach time.
Okay.
It's a really beautiful small town. That's usually a lot cooler than Menlo Park, which is very nice sometimes. And yeah, it's really nice just going on walks. There's a lot of beautiful nature there. So that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time with my family. I have a son, and we stay with my wife and in Pacifica. So we just like walking around and exploring the Bay Area. There's so much to do around here, and having a toddler is very interesting.
Yeah, man.
You gotta kind of do adventures that work for him,
Yeah.
and work for all of us. And so
Yeah.
we're kind of exploring the Bay Area in a whole new set of eyes.
Mm-hmm. Dude, so fun. And Disneyland with a whole new set of eyes.
Yes, Disneyland was interesting, man, with the toddler.
Okay.
Going about half the speed, but having twice the fun.
I love that. Whoa, nice. Awesome. Well, Harold, before we jump into your story, I'm going to have you recap it a little bit, but I wanted to bring you on today. Normally, this would be a message or a podcast with Phil where we go over his message and talk about the series that we're in right now, which is Storytellers. And this week was focusing around sharing your story. And I thought that you did a brilliant job of doing that last time you were on the podcast. And what's cool about this series is it's looking at all of our lives and seeing the stories, even the stories, if you're listening to this later and you're like, man, I don't have a story close to Harold's. Well, your story is still worth telling. And that's the message that we have here. And by sharing our stories, we can share the hope that we have through God. And so this week was all about learning how to share our story. And we created some resources around that. And we're even going to be doing a little social media contest this week as well, where if people share their stories with us online, there's a resource that's available that is helping you think about your story. And there's actually a section of that where you can tell us your story.
Oh.
So for everyone that tells us their story, they're going to be able to win a pumpkin spice latte.
Oh,
that's right.
nice.
It's PSL season. So pumpkin spice latte is coming your way if you're our randomly selected winner of sharing your story with us. And so, Harold, let's go ahead. Let's dive in a little bit more of a recap. So what was home like growing up? What was family like? And then we'll just get going from there.
Yeah, so growing up, I grew up in Pacifica, so it's a pretty quiet town. Nothing crazy ever happens there. I would say I grew up with a pretty stable household. So nothing, I would think nothing too crazy ever happened in my life. I just, went to school and had some great loving parents. There was nothing really like that stood out to me in my upbringing that would make me suspect anything was strange.
Okay.
So a little bit
foreshadowing.
of foreshadowing.
Yeah.
So I would think it was pretty normal. I grew up going to church. So going to church ministry was always a part of my life. My uncle is a pastor in South San Francisco, and so over time, my father felt the calling to also be a pastor. So he planted his own church, and my immediate family was a part of that. And so it went from, just attending church to now serving and helping at any capacity.
Yeah. Was that also in Pacifica?
It was not in Pacifica.
Oh.
It was also around the South San Francisco area.
Okay. Sure.
But we moved around a lot because we didn't really have a location until we grew a little bit bigger. My father is now retired, but that was also the introduction of tech for me. And I started serving in that way. And back to what you were saying, not knowing, tech, that's where I learned a lot of what I know today is just serving.
Wow.
It's just helping at any capacity. So it was a lot of fun. It's kind of like a startup kind of feel,
Yeah.
you're just doing whatever you can to help out. And it was really fun. It was really exciting. And that's really what brought me to where I am today, is helping my family serve God.
Yeah. And then were you one of those kids those notorious pastors' kids that had a falling out from church and then did your own thing and then somehow found your way back? Or were you in church pretty consistently your whole life? What was that journey like for you?
So I knew the stereotype that was always in the back of my mind. I was like, I'm not going to fall for it.
Yeah.
So in a way, I guess I kind of had my own type of falling out because there was a lot of confusion, a lot of tension. Being in ministry with family is hard. It's very hard. But I would say what saved me is being surrounded by men and by pastors and mentors who were always available to me and talking to them about it. And I specifically remember one night calling a pastor who was who was in a similar situation that I was in. His father is a pastor,
Okay.
and he had a couple brothers who were also in ministry, and I could just call him at any time and tell him, hey, this is what I'm dealing with right now. I don't know what to do. Where do I go from here? How did you deal with this tension?
Yeah.
And he just walked me through it step by step. He would just tell me, hey, yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I went through, and this is how I got through it. And that was such a weight off my shoulders to know that I wasn't alone.
Okay. Wow. Man. And then how did you end up working for a church? You seem like you've kind of grown up in that and you fought that tension, and that somehow led you to, was it Bethel? Is that correct?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I kind of became known as the tech guy
Okay.
among, family and friends. And so I was really passionate about cameras and photography
Okay.
and all things video and broadcast. And so I started helping out other smaller churches with their camera setups. And I guess word got around.
Okay.
I became known as like the video broadcast guy for every church in
Yeah.
the Northern Bay Area.
Okay.
So I started stepping into different, churches and helping them sort out their tech. And then eventually word got down to San Jose, and a pastor reached out to me. I had met him before. We were friends before, but he ended up taking a role as a pastor in Bethel, San Jose. He reached out to me and he said, hey, we're actually looking for a broadcast guy, someone who's got good heart, someone who knows how to build volunteer teams and who knows the technical side of broadcast to take this position. And I want you to be a part of my team and help me out. And I was like, let's do it, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So I took on that role and I was there for 2 years.
Cool.
And it was so much fun. Again, it was kind of like that startup kind of feel because the church was revamping, it's rebranding. It was so much fun.
Good.
And then from there, we became pregnant with Ezra.
Okay.
And that changed the game for us.
Yeah.
I realized at that moment, this is God's gift to us. And this is really important for us. And I realized that given the distance between Pacifica and San Jose, it was going to be a little bit more difficult for me to be a present father
Okay.
and also give everything I have
Yeah.
in ministry.
Yeah.
And so my wife and I talked and prayed, and we knew that we needed to look for something a little bit closer.
Okay.
And we found a home at Menlo.
Awesome. Well, we're so glad that you landed here, Harold.
I am too.
It's awesome having you. And just great to hear your heart and your obedience towards God. And it sounds like you've definitely wrestled, but you have a very strong foundation with who you are and with your relationship with God. And so let's get back to that nugget of foreshadow. So you have this strong foundation,
Yep.
and then at some point in the last year or so, which you shared before,
Yeah.
you found out some news.
Yes. I found out from someone outside of our family that my father was actually not my biological father.
Wow.
And that rocked me hard. I was in disbelief as I was hearing this from this person. But what really rocked me was they pulled out some pictures and showed me pictures of my actual biological father. And it was copy and paste, exactly like me. There was
Wow.
no doubt that this man was my father at all.
Yeah.
I was kind of just lost. I felt like my whole world was spinning. I didn't know what to believe. I didn't know who to believe. And I just spent 3 days in this giant tornado of confusion. I felt like my faith was even rocked a little bit. I was questioning whether to trust God. But through it all, for some reason, I still felt Jesus loving me and holding on to me through all that. And that's really what kept me grounded through the chaos.
Yeah.
And regardless of, what was going on around me, clinging onto my faith was what brought me through all of that. And I still feel Jesus holding on to me, and in a way that I've never felt before. And so instead of feeling lost, I felt more secure afterwards. Instead of feeling without identity, I felt more like I could stand firm on Jesus because I can trust him with anything in my entire life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So this person that shared with you,
Mm-hmm.
obviously your mom knows.
Yes.
Who else in your family knew? Was this news to everyone or?
It was not news to anyone, actually.
What?
Everyone knew. And that's what really,
Like your whole,
my whole extended family, everybody knew. My uncles, my aunts, my parents knew.
wow.
The only people that didn't really know were like my cousins, my younger cousins.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone knew.
Okay.
My grandmother knew, everyone.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so that's kind of what also led to more of the confusion. I was like, who do I
Sure.
trust? Like,
Yeah.
who's on my side, you know?
Yeah.
So of course, that caused a bit of tension within my family because I was pretty upset, and I confronted my mother and my father.
Yeah.
And I found out my mother never wanted to tell me. The reason is, of course, there was a lot of shame around that, and that's understandable. But
Yeah.
I felt like at some point it was something that I should have been told, and I found out anyways. And I found out probably in the worst way possible. It's from someone outside our family, someone who's not even related to us.
Wow.
And my parents, my family had been trying hard to make sure that I never knew my entire life. So for 20 plus years, they kept it a secret.
Wow.
And I still found out anyways.
Wow, Harold.
Yeah.
Okay, so you found out the news.
Mm-hmm.
At what point did you ever want to see your biological dad? You mentioned seeing a picture and seeing
Yeah.
like you and him look very similar.
Mm-hmm.
What was that process like for you? And I think that's where we left off last
Yeah.
time. So we actually get an answer this time, which I'm
Yes.
very excited for. So what happened?
So, yeah, I didn't really, there was just so much to process that I didn't really want to meet him.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like there was a need to either because I had a father who loved me, and I have two fathers actually, Jesus, who's my father, and then I also have my earthly father, the one who raised me, the person who cared for me, who was there my whole life and played with me and loved me. And I didn't feel like there was a need to search for this other lost father that I had never met.
Right.
But I knew that this story had unraveled for a reason, and this path had opened up,
Yeah.
and I learned this for a reason. So I decided to pursue it and see where it went.
Okay.
And I decided to reach out to him
Wow.
at some point after I had processed, and it had been probably 2 years after I found out about.
Whoa, that's a long time.
Yes, I needed a lot of time to process. And kind of prepare myself. I was a little scared about what I was going to find out about him.
Of course.
I don't know if you remember Stuart Little when he met his parents in that movie. He had parents, and
Yeah.
they were little mice, and he was really disappointed to find out who his parents were. Like they were kind of trashy people. Like they weren't
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
And so I was kind of coming into this with that same expectation, like this guy's probably some kind of bum. Like I don't really care to know who he is or what kind of person he is.
Yeah.
But something kept tugging at me, and so I decided to reach out to him. And
How did you find his contact?
so actually the person that told me
Yeah.
also connected me with some other siblings that I discovered that I also had.
Whoa.
So I also have 4 other siblings that I didn't know about. And they knew about me, but I did not know about them. And so I reached out to them, and we connected, and we had Christmas together that year that I found out that they existed. They're such beautiful, wonderful, loving people. I love them so much. They are my brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And they connected me with my biological father. They kind of gave me a glimpse into their life and told me a little bit about him. They don't have a great relationship with him. So that kind of, I would say, skewed my view
Mm-hmm.
of him a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that also led to some hesitancy
Of course.
reaching out to him. So eventually I got around to texting him, and I thought, let's just meet somewhere. Let me sit down with him, chat, just one-on-one, and we'll see where this goes. So I sent him a text. We met at a local diner, and when I came in, I was just looking for him, and I knew it wasn't going to be very hard to spot him. Of course, I was correct. He looked exactly like me.
Whoa.
It was really, really weird seeing
Yeah.
him walking into the restaurant. We were both a little nervous, I can tell. We gave each other a firm handshake.
Okay.
It was like meeting a stranger, but not really, because I don't know this guy. I don't know who he is. He doesn't know me,
Yeah.
but he's a significant part of my life, and it was so strange. I could never describe the feeling because I've never experienced that with anyone else.
Yeah.
But just looking at his face and seeing his facial expressions, his facial structure, and how similar it was to me, except with a few more wrinkles.
Wow.
That was so strange.
Yeah.
It's such an odd experience.
Yeah.
So we sat down, and we were both nervous.
I'm nervous right now.
Yeah. I think he was questioning, what my motives were and why I had texted him and told him to come meet. And then I just got right to it. And I said, hey, I just wanted to know your side of the story.
Hmm.
I want to know why you left. I want to know, just what your heart behind all this was. What's your perspective on all this? How do you view me? And he got started and told me his story.
Wow.
And we had such a deep conversation, open and honest. And we actually started to have a really great time.
Wow.
And it was a busy restaurant, busy day. It was loud, noisy, but then we quickly became probably the noisiest table, just laughing. The dude is funny.
Okay.
The dude's got jokes.
Okay.
And he just told me stories about his life growing up in Guatemala. He's a Guatemalan. He's told me about, how he met my mother and how he viewed me. He told me that he never hid the fact that I existed. He always was open and honest about that with everyone. And that gave me the feeling that he had nothing to hide. And I corroborated everything that he told me with my siblings that I had met recently, my sisters and my brothers. And they said, yeah, I mean, it all checks out. That's exactly right. So during this conversation, I never felt like he was lying, like there was any dishonesty. He was just open and honest about everything. And it was kind of a relief, to know that he's just being real with me right now.
Yeah. Wow.
And I could tell that he really wanted to continue developing a relationship with me. But I kind of kept him at an arm's length because, again, this guy's a stranger. I don't know who he is. He wanted to meet my family and right away, and he wanted me to meet his family. But I just told him, hey, look, let's take things one step at a time because, we're strangers. We don't really know each other yet.
Yeah.
Regardless of that, we had a great time.
Okay.
Surprisingly great time. And I actually am really looking forward to meeting him again.
Okay. So you haven't met up with him again since then?
Haven't met up with him again since then because he shared a lot with me about his side of the story, and there's a lot to process there too. And I shared that with you, Mark. There was the day after I think I met up with him, I told you about it, and there was so much information that I'm not ready to share yet.
Of course.
There's a whole nother side to this that I discovered recently, and it's still unraveling.
Yeah.
It's still, I couldn't possibly share that on the podcast just yet.
Yeah.
I shared a little bit with you,
Yeah.
but there's quite a bit more to this
Mm-hmm.
story than I was expecting.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, maybe that'll be a part 3 for our podcast.
It could be.
But yeah, the reasons why he left, that was pretty shocking to me.
Mm-hmm.
It goes way deeper than I could possibly
Mm-hmm.
explain right now at this moment.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you bringing us up to speed
Mm-hmm.
and just the vulnerability and honesty in which you shared that with.
Mm-hmm.
And so that meeting was a couple months ago.
Yep.
Okay. Since hearing his side of the story
Mm-hmm.
and with you having a little bit more time to sit with it,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think God is trying to tell you through that story?
I think he's teaching me how to tell this story. Because I know that God is doing something through it with me,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that God can also use it to impact someone else. And there's so much to share. There's so many details, so many things that I could say, but how do I get right down to the meaty stuff in a short amount of time
Mm-hmm.
and kind of give my elevator pitch, quote unquote,
Sure.
and impact someone else?
Yeah.
You know, I think that's kind of a journey I've been on for a while now, is telling stories well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very recent journey for me because, like I said, being in tech, we're not very socially
Mm-hmm.
skilled.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel God developing me in that way. And the more I tell this story, the better I feel about the way that I'm sharing that story.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess that's encouragement for someone out there who's not really sure about their story, how to share it. Just practice telling it to other people.
Yeah.
Share it with as many people as possible, and kind of be ready to share an elevator pitch type of story, a little
Sure.
condensed story, and also share, your heart. And you never know how it's going to impact or affect someone else around you.
Yeah. I think what's amazing too about the way in which you shared your story was it was just honest and you talking.
Yep.
It wasn't scripted words or phrases. It wasn't you trying to embellish or you trying to make something sound more or less dramatic than what it was. It was you honestly giving an account of your experience.
Yep.
And God is going to use that so mightily in other people's lives. But I also think what I really appreciate about you is the way in which you were able to be open to hearing a story and curious enough to one, seek out your dad, and then two, hear his side of the story from a genuine spot of curiosity and not from disappointment or resentment or malice or anger or excitement or the other end of the spectrum either, but just from a general like, hey, I'm just here to listen.
That's a great point. You
Yeah.
brought up a really good point. I was scared.
I'm sure you were.
It's terrifying to walk through that, to explore this whole new avenue of my life, and to see down this path and wonder, what's around the corner. But if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have a story to share with you today.
Wow.
I wouldn't have anything to say.
Yeah.
And I think that's just part of life is first discerning with God, like what is the right path, which way do I go? And then once you have the answer, is to gather the courage to actually walk down that path. And you never know what kind of story comes out of those things.
That's amazing. Yeah. Wow, Harold, I just see moments of God all throughout that story, even growing up in the church too. God was so clearly present there. I don't know how you're going to answer this question, but I feel like I could ask it. What do you think God has in store for your future story?
I think that, like I was sharing before, I feel God pulling me towards being a better storyteller,
Okay.
because that is how I can make the most impact with the most amount of people.
Yeah.
How I share my story with other people, how it can inspire other people, how it can bring people closer to God. I feel like that is a powerful way to capture people's attention and inspire and and kind of make people curious about God. And that's really what Jesus did, was he told stories. And there was no production, right? There was no lights, there was no cameras. He just told genuine stories, and he told them very well. And so that's kind of what I'm drawn to, is being able to tell stories with other people and bringing the most out of them, and bringing some kind of inspiration and curiosity to faith.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to encourage you too, Harold. Thank you so much for sharing. And in a way, you are a masterful storyteller by how you produce and do our services on the weekends. Like, you're telling the story of what we're seeing on the screen, the cameras when they're being cut from that camera to that camera, or when an illustration pops up on the screen. Like, you're helping illustrate and bring the story of Sunday to life. So I think you're already an amazing storyteller. Now you're just being able to learn how to do that with your mouth.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Well, Harold, if you had 1 minute to share an encouragement of something about what you've shared so far, if you want to just encourage one person for 1 minute, what do you think you'd say?
I'd say if you are at a place where you feel like you're not that person to tell your story, or you're not that person to talk to strangers, or to, talk about God to other people, I would say that's probably not the case. God calls all of us to share our story at some capacity. And I was that person that was quiet, who would not share their story. And God has taken me on a journey to where I am today, to speak up and to inspire other people. And I think that if you've really been praying for God to use you, and for God to use you to make an impact in this world, one of those things that's going to be required of you at some point is for you to speak up and to say something. And so, maybe right now you don't have the skills. Someone out there maybe doesn't have the speaking skills. They think they're not articulate enough, or they don't have the right words. I'm not super articulate. I sometimes don't know what I'm going to say next, but just practice. It takes practice. It takes sharing with many people. It takes development, maybe reading books about it. But yeah, I think God does want to use you, whoever's listening. God wants to use you. God wants to do something through you. And sometimes it takes taking that next step of courage, and trusting that God is going to take you where you need to go. Just take that first step. Just open your mouth and see what comes out.
Well, Harold, thank you so much for your courage in being with us today. And this time being in front of the cameras instead of behind them. I know that's a big step for you, but
Yes.
I really believe that what you just shared is so encouraging, and I just want to say thank you. And so if you also want to encourage Harold as well, you can text our team this week, 650-600-0402. I'll gladly pass on your messages to Harold. And I hope that you see this as an encouragement as well to share your story with us. So like I said, we have an area of resource. You can click on it in the show notes or in the YouTube description of where you can find the resources on, one, how to approach telling your story, and then two, actually sharing your story. And so we hope that you can do that with us this week. If you need any prayer or encouragement, reach out. We'd love to be there for you and listen to your story. Have a wonderful week, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
See you guys.